Hi, friends. I want to start today with a question, not a question I'm going to answer for you. A question I want you to sit with for just a moment. A question that might make you a little uncomfortable. And that's okay, because the greatest growth in your life has never come from comfort, has it? Here is the question, Dot. When was the last time you chose yourself? Not your children, not your husband, not your mother in law, not your boss, not your best friend who needed you at 2 in the morning. When was the last time, the very last time that you looked in the mirror, looked yourself in the eyes, and said, "Today I choose me"? I'll tell you something. I travel across this world. I speak in stadiums, in auditoriums, in small rooms with plastic chairs and flickering lights. And in every country, in every city, in every room I walk into, I meet her. I always meet her. She's sitting somewhere in the audience. Sometimes she's in the front row, arms crossed, pretending she doesn't need to be here. Sometimes she's in the back, almost invisible, like she spent her whole life perfecting the art of not taking up space. Sometimes she's right in the middle, laughing at the right moments, nodding at the right times, looking like everything is absolutely fine. And it is not fine. It has not been fine for a long time. She's tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. She's tired in her soul. She's tired of being strong. She's tired of being the one who holds everything together while she herself is falling apart. She is tired of being the last on every list, including her own. She is tired of dreaming in secret because she's afraid that if she says her dreams out loud, someone will laugh, or worse, someone won't laugh. Someone will look at her with those eyes full of quiet pity, and say, "But who are you to want that?" Friend, if that is you today, if even one corner of your heart recognized itself in those words, then I want you to know something before we go any further together. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are not too much or too little or too old or too ordinary. You are a woman who has been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. And today, we are going to talk about what happens when you finally put some of that weight down. Now, let me tell you about a woman I once met in Mumbai. I'm not going to use her real name, so let's call her Priya. Priya came to one of my sessions years ago, and she sat exactly where I described, right in the middle of the room. Perfect posture, perfect smile, beautifully dressed. After the session, almost everyone had left, and Priya was still sitting there, not moving, just sitting. That I walked over to her and I asked, "Are you all right?" And she looked up at me. And in that fraction of a second, before she assembled a smile again, I saw it. The exhaustion, the grief. The years and years of something she had never said out loud to anyone. She said, "I'm fine. I'm just a little tired." I sat down next to her and I said, "I know, but I don't think you're tired from today. I think you've been tired for a very long time." And that was all it took. That one sentence. She broke. Not dramatically, not the way they show it in films. She just quietly began to cry. The kind of crying that is terrifyingly silent. The kind of crying that has been waiting behind a dam for years. She told me her story. She was 43 years old. 43 years old. She had spent 20 years in a marriage where she had slowly disappeared. Not because her husband was a monster. He wasn't. He was just indifferent. And sometimes indifference is crueler than cruelty, because at least cruelty acknowledges your existence. Indifference just looks through you. She had raised 3 children. She had cooked, she had cleaned, she had attended every parents' meeting, every family function, every wedding, every distant relative. She had smiled through every single one. She had abandoned a career in architecture that she had been brilliant at, genuinely brilliant, because someone at some point had made her feel that her brilliance was inconvenient. And here she was at 43. Her children were growing up. Her marriage was a performance. And she couldn't remember the last thing she had wanted, not needed. Wanted, she said to me, "I feel like I've been living someone else's life, like I got into the wrong story somewhere and I can't find my way back to mine." Friends, I have thought about Priya so many times since that day. And I've thought about how many millions of Priyas there are in this world, sitting in the middle of the room, perfect smile, quietly breaking. And so today I want to speak directly to every Priya in this room, every Priya watching this, every Priya who forwarded this video to herself at midnight, because something in the title reached through the screen and touched her. This speech is for you. Let's start at the beginning. Not the beginning of your story, the beginning of your power. There is a concept in the ancient wisdom traditions that I come from, and it is this. Every single human being who walks this earth arrives with a unique purpose, a unique energy, a unique set of gifts that the universe has never produced before and will never produce again. There has never been another you, not in the 10,000 years of recorded human history, not in the millions of years before that. The exact combination of your experiences, your sensitivities, your laughter, your failures, your fears, your love, that combination has never existed. And it will never exist again once you are gone. Do you understand what that means? It means that the thing you are withholding from this world by not becoming who you are meant to be, that thing is irreplaceable. It cannot be substituted. No one else can do it. Not your sister. Not your friend who seems like she has it all figured out. Not the woman you follow on social media who has a perfect flat, perfect skin, and photographs her breakfast in perfect lighting. Nobody. Only you. And yet, we spend our lives shrinking. Let me ask you, and I want you to be honest with yourself, just for this moment, in the privacy of your own heart. When was the last time someone interrupted you mid-sentence and you just let them? When was the last time you apologized for something that was not your fault? When was the last time you made yourself smaller, quieter, less visible, so that someone else could feel more comfortable? Yesterday, this morning, 5 minutes before you walked in here, we do this. Women especially. And it is not because women are weak. It is almost the opposite. It is because women are so socially attuned, so deeply wired for connection and harmony that they sacrifice themselves on the altar of keeping the peace. They say sorry when they've done nothing wrong. They shrink when they should expand. They whisper when they should roar, And over time, friends, over years and decades of whispering when you should roar, you forget that you ever had a roar. You forget the girl you were. I want to talk about that girl for a moment. Do you remember her? Close your eyes for a second if you want. Go back. Go back to when you were 8 years old, or 10, or 12, before the world got its hands on you. Before people started telling you what you could and couldn't be. Before the rejections. Before the heartbreaks. Before the responsibilities. Before the voice in your head started sounding suspiciously, like every person who ever doubted you. Who was she, that girl? She was fearless, wasn't she? She had dreams that were absolutely enormous. She was going to be an astronaut, or a dancer, or a doctor, or an author, or maybe all of those things at once. She laughed too loudly. She took up space without apologizing for it. She fell down and scraped her knees and got back up. Not because someone told her to be resilient, but because getting back up was just what you did. It never even occurred to her not to. What happened to her? What happened to her? I'll tell you what happened to her. Her world happened to her. People happened to her. One comment at a time, one dismissal at a time. One, you're too sensitive, and one, you're too emotional, and one, who do you think you are? At a time, but here is what I want you to understand. She is still there. That girl is not gone. She has not been destroyed, she has been buried. Under the years, under the responsibilities, under the pain, under the people pleasing, and the self-doubt and the exhaustion. But she is still there, alive, waiting, patient in the way that only buried things are patient. And one of the greatest purposes of your life, one of the great adventures available to you regardless of your age, regardless of what has happened, is to go back and find her. This is what changing your life begins with. Not a new habit, not a morning routine, not a vision board, though those things have their place. It begins with this fundamental act of excavation, digging back down through the layers to find out who you were before the world told you who to be. Now some of you are thinking, and I can almost hear it from up here, that's very beautiful, but I'm 45, I'm 50. I'm 38 with 2 kids and a mortgage and a job I need to keep. This excavation business sounds lovely for a weekend retreat, but I live in the real world. And I love that thought, because it gives me a chance to introduce you to someone. Her name was Veera Wang, you know that name, the most celebrated bridal fashion designer in the world. Do you know she didn't start designing until she was 40 years old? 40 years old. 40. Before that, she had been a figure skater who didn't make the Olympic team. Then she was an editor at Vogue for 16 years. She failed to become editor-in-chief. At 40, after a lifetime of what looked like detours and disappointments, she designed her own wedding dress because she couldn't find what she wanted. And from that single act of designing for herself, an empire was born. 40 years old, or let me tell you about Harriet Dover. Harriet Dover. She went back to college in her 60s. Her 60s. She had spent her whole life raising children and supporting her husband's career. At 67 years old, she published her first novel. It won the National Book Award. It was described as one of the most beautiful pieces of American fiction in a generation. 67 years old, publishing her first novel, winning the National Book Award, or this one. I want you to think about Grandma Moses, Anna Mary Robertson Moses. She was a farmer's wife who spent her entire life doing farm work. She took up painting as a hobby at 78 years old because arthritis made her needlework too painful. She became one of the most celebrated folk artists in American history. Her paintings have sold for millions of dollars. She lived to be 101 years old, producing art until the very end, 78 years old. Friends, let me be very clear about something. The universe does not check your age before it decides whether your dreams are valid. Time does not discriminate. Opportunity does not come with an expiry date stamped on it for women only. These are lies we have been told. These are cages we have accepted as homes, and it is past time to walk out of them. Let me now talk about something that I believe is the single greatest enemy of women's potential. Greater than any external obstacle, greater than any unfair system. I'm not saying those systems aren't real, they are real, and they matter, and they need to change. But today I want to talk about the enemy that lives inside. The enemy is this: the belief that you are not enough, not smart enough, not attractive enough, not experienced enough, not young enough, not educated enough, not brave enough, not worthy enough, just not enough. Where does this belief come from? It comes from 1,000 places. It comes from a culture that tells women their value is primarily in their appearance and their usefulness to others. It comes from families where girls were subtly or not so subtly given less encouragement, less freedom, less belief. It comes from schools where confidence was sometimes punished in girls as aggression. It comes from relationships where you were made to feel small by someone who was themselves terrified of how big you could be. And it accumulates. Layer by layer, year by year, it accumulates until it feels not like something that was put on you, but like something that is just true. Just a fact about yourself. Like the color of your eyes, I'm not enough. But it is not a fact. It is a scar. And scars with time and with the right healing can fade. There is a Japanese art form. And I have spoken about this before, called kintsugi. In kintsugi, when a bowl or a vase breaks, instead of throwing it away or trying to hide the cracks, the artist repairs it with gold. Pure gold. The philosophy behind it is breathtaking in its simplicity. The breakage is not something to be ashamed of. The breakage is part of the history of the object. And those golden seams where the breaks were, those are not flaws. Those are what make the object more beautiful, more valuable, more unique than it was before it broke. You are a kintsugi woman. Every scar you carry, every failure, every broken dream, every relationship that shattered, every morning you couldn't get out of bed, every night you cried in the bathroom so your children wouldn't hear, every time you tried and failed and tried again. Those are not evidence of your inadequacy. Those are your goals. The women who move the world, the women who inspire generations, who build things, who change things, who heal things, they are not women without wounds. They are women who learn to wear their wounds as armor. Now I want to talk about something practical. Because I am at heart a practical person, and beautiful ideas without practical roots don't grow. They just float. And floating is not the same as flying. The first practical thing I want you to do, and you can start this today, this evening, tonight, is to get radically honest with yourself about where you are, not where you pretend to be. Not where you tell people you are when they ask at dinner parties, where you actually are. Take out a piece of paper or open the notes app on your phone and write down the answers to these 3 questions without editing yourself, without making your answers more presentable, without protecting anyone's feelings, including your own. Question 1. In what areas of my life am I genuinely happy and fulfilled? Question 2. In what areas of my life am I pretending? Question 3. What is the one thing I want most that I have never allowed myself to fully pursue, and why? That third question is the key to the lock. Because here is what I have found in years of working with people. Most of us know exactly what we want. We are not actually confused about our purpose, our desire, our dreams. We are afraid. Afraid that we'll try and fail. Afraid that we'll succeed and it will change everything. Afraid that the people we love will not understand, or will not support us, or will feel left behind. Afraid that we are too ordinary to deserve extraordinary things, and so we wrap our fear in the language of confusion. I don't know what I want. It is so much softer than the truth, which is, I know exactly what I want and I am terrified of it. So let me speak to that fear directly. Yes, you might try and fail. In fact, I would bet on it. Not to discourage you, to prepare you. Because failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of the path to success. It always has been. The greatest successes in human history are built on the rubble of failures we never hear about, because once the success comes, the failures fade from the story. Thomas Edison failed thousands of times before the light bulb worked. You know this story. You know this story. But what they don't tell you is that he was almost certainly not the only one working on a light bulb. There were other inventors, equally intelligent, equally dedicated, who failed the same number of times and stopped. They stopped. And we remember Edison not because he was uniquely brilliant, but because he was uniquely unwilling to stop. The question is never, what if I fail? The question is, when I fail, and I will, am I going to stop? Or am I going to pick up what I've learned from that failure? The way you pick up gold from a broken bowl and keep going. Now let me talk about relationships. Because I cannot talk about women changing their lives without talking about the relationships that shape those lives and sometimes constrain those lives. I want to be thoughtful here because I'm not standing here to tell you that all relationships that feel difficult are wrong or that all restraining influences in your life are to be abandoned. Life is complex. People are complex, and wisdom is in the bit. I do want to say this in the nuance that I do want to say this. There are people in your life who expand you. And there are people in your life who contract you, the people who expand you. When you leave a conversation with them, you feel more alive, more possible, more yourself. You feel seen. You feel believed in. You feel like the best version of you is not some distant aspiration, but a living, breathing thing that is already starting to emerge. The people who contract you, when you leave a conversation with them, you feel smaller than when you arrived. You feel like your dreams are ridiculous. You feel like your needs are inconvenient. You feel fundamentally like too much and not enough at exactly the same time. Now, those contracting people are not always bad people. Sometimes they are the people who love you most in the world. But they are afraid. Afraid for you, afraid of change, afraid of what you're becoming might mean for the life they've built with you. And because they are afraid, they project that fear onto you as wisdom. Be careful, they say. Don't risk it. They say, you have so much to lose. They say, you have so much to lose. And what they're really saying is, I am scared. And your ambition is making my fear louder. And I need you to be smaller so I can be comfortable. Friends, we cannot afford to make ourselves smaller so that others can be comfortable. And yet, how do we navigate this without destroying the relationships we love? This is where real wisdom comes in. You start by having the conversation, not the explosion. Not the ultimatum. The honest, vulnerable, terrifying conversation. I need you to know that this dream of mine is not a hobby. It is not a phase. It is something I need to pursue, not just for my own happiness, but because something in me will die if I don't. I don't need you to understand it completely. I need you to trust me enough to let me try. Some relationships will rise to meet that conversation. Some will not. And for those that will not, that is some of the most heartbreaking information you will ever receive about a person. Because it means that their love for you has conditions, that it requires your smallness to survive. And a love that requires your smallness is not the love you deserve. Let me tell you about another woman. This one lived 100 years ago, and her name was Marie Curie daughter. You know her name? You know she won 2 Nobel Prizes. The only person in history, man or woman, to have won Nobel Prizes in 2 different sciences. You know she is a legend, but do you know her life path? Marie Curie was a woman in a world that did not believe women deserved to be scientists. She was denied entry to universities in her home country of Poland because she was a woman. She moved to Paris at 24 years old with almost no money, and she worked and studied so intensely that she fainted from hunger and exhaustion on multiple occasions. When she wanted to attend meetings of scientific societies, they made her sit in the back. When she won her first Nobel Prize, her husband had to fight for her to be acknowledged at the ceremony. When her husband died in a tragic accident, she was left alone to raise two children while continuing to work in a field that largely did not respect her, and she kept going. She kept going not because she was superhuman. She kept going because she had connected with something inside herself that was more powerful than every obstacle arrayed against her. She had connected with her purpose. And when you connect with your purpose, friends, when you find that thing that you were put here to do, the obstacles don't disappear, but they change character. They go from walls to wind. And wind, though it can be fierce, is something you can walk into. It pushes back, but it does not stop you. What is your purpose? I want to spend some time on this because I think it is the most important and the most misunderstood question a person can ask themselves. Purpose is not your job title. Purpose is not what you do to earn money, though sometimes, if you are very fortunate, those things align. Purpose is not a single dramatic thing you're meant to do before you die. Purpose, as I understand it, and this comes from years of studying ancient wisdom and years of talking to real human beings in the full complexity of their lives. Purpose is the intersection of three things. The thing you love to do so much that you lose track of time when you're doing it. The thing you are naturally gifted at, even when you've never been formally trained. The thing that when you do it for others, creates something in them. Relief, joy, healing, possibility, beauty, clarity. Clarity. That intersection, that place where those three rivers meet, that is your purpose, and everything you need to live it is already inside you. Not on a shelf somewhere waiting to be purchased. Not in a degree you haven't earned. Inside you, right now, as you sit here. The work, and it is work, I will not pretend otherwise. The work is to clear away the rubble that covers it so you can see it clearly. And here is how that work begins. It begins with daily, deliberate, non-negotiable time for yourself. I want to talk about this because I find that many women resist this concept, not because they don't understand it intellectually, but to feel guilty about it. Guilt is perhaps the most persistent thief of women's potential. Guilt about wanting, guilt about needing, guilt about saying no, guilt about closing the door, guilt about choosing themselves even for an hour in a day. Where does this guilt come from? It comes from a very old story. A story that says a good woman is a selfless woman, that her value is measured in what she gives to others. Okay. That her needs are secondary, always secondary, to the needs of the people in her care. And there is something beautiful in that story. There is the capacity for selflessness, for deep care, for love that transcends the self. These are among the most magnificent qualities of the human heart. And women, historically, have carried these qualities in extraordinary measure. But here is what the story gets wrong. Here is the flaw in the foundation. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. This is not a metaphor. This is physiology, psychology, and spirituality all arriving at the same conclusion. When you give and give and give and give without ever replenishing yourself, you do not become selfless. You become depleted. And from depletion, you cannot love generously. You cannot parent with presence. You cannot create with passion. You cannot contribute meaningfully. You give the thin, brittle, anxious version of your love. The love that has running out woven into its texture. But when you take care of yourself, when you fill yourself up regularly, deliberately, unapologetically, what you have to give is different in kind, not just quantity. It is the love of someone who is whole, who is present, who is not counting what she is given because she has enough. It is the love that children feel is safe. It is the love that partnerships thrive in. It is the love that communities are nourished by. So when I tell you to make daily, non-negotiable time for yourself, I am not telling you to be selfish. I am telling you to be strategic. I am telling you to be the woman who refuels so she can keep flying, instead of the woman who keeps flying on fumes until she crashes. What does this time look like? It looks different for every woman, and that's exactly as it should be. For one woman, it is 30 minutes of meditation in the morning before anyone else is awake. For another, it is an evening walk where she is not a mother or a wife or a professional. She is just herself with the sky and the movement and the silence. For another, it is painting. For another, it is reading. For another, it is prayer. For another, it is a conversation, a real conversation, not a logistical exchange, with a friend who sees her.